Hi, I'm Hector Garcia. I am a clinical and evolutionary psychologist. And for those of you unfamiliar with my work, it mostly focuses on those topics that we are told we're not supposed to talk about at the Thanksgiving Day dinner table. Politics, religion, and increasingly sex and gender. So my first book, Alpha God, is about the psychology of religious violence. And my second book, Sex, Power, and Partisanship, is about the psychology of political division, which I care very much about. And so I talk about these topics all the time because I think it's often the things we're told we're not supposed to talk about that demand the most intensive scrutiny and the most thoughtful conversation. And not only that, as a free thinker, I understand the value of free inquiry, the ability to freely ask questions, even difficult questions, even controversial questions, and to freely exchange ideas because a free society rests on that freedom. We can't have free societies if we can't do that. So I will also want to share with you that I'm very interested in the psychology of tribalism, because that psychology determines whether or not we have stable, functioning, peaceable societies, or whether we have dysfunctional societies where we're fighting each other in the streets like we're increasingly seeing today. So I have used my career and my writing and my research and my public speaking career to try and shed light on what drives these divisions, because I don't think they're healthy. So that being said, let me talk about Matt Dillahunty. And because the purpose of me making this video is to respond to Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty is a prominent atheist figure in the United States who has a show on YouTube called The Hang Up. Matt recently went on The Hang Up and he cursed me out for about half an hour. Shared some personal details about conversations that we had about my dating life, and grossly misrepresented my position, my thinking, and the things that I said. And that's what concerns me the most. So I thought, oh boy, well, I should make a video to clarify things. And at very least, we can use this video for a learning experience, right? And especially to learn how friendships, how societies, how nations can become divided along political lines, and use this as a case study. And so before I get into the details, let me just say something about Matt Dillahunty. I like Matt Dillahunty. He's an okay guy. You know, we were friends leading up to this. He'd call me, I'd call him. He's done nice things for me. He's even taken me to the airport and picked me up when me and my ex-girlfriend were traveling out of Austin. Like, nice guy. And, contrary to his public persona, he's actually pretty chill. And something about him, when you try to make eye contact with Matt and he averts his gaze in a certain way, there's a certain vulnerability to him that you just would not know by his public persona. Because on his show, The Hang Up, Matt is a bully. What that show is about is he has theists call in to debate him about religion. And debate him, I say debate him, because what he does is he yells at them, he calls them names, he demeans them, he calls them fucking stupid, and then he hangs up on them. And so that approach has, speaking of division, that has caused a major rift in the free thought atheist humanist community. So I will say there is a certain personality type that likes that approach. And to understand that personality type, go to his show and read the comments. Some people are just, it's bloodlust, right? They're like, yeah, Matt, you really told this person how stupid he was, right? And to my mind, people who respond that way are the same kind of atheists that gets mad at you if you wish them Merry Christmas. The same kind of atheist that will tell their friend who just lost their beloved grandmother that they're never going to see their grandmother again because heaven doesn't exist, that kind of thing. But on the other end, there are people who think that, that's just not the right approach. That doesn't give a good name to unbelievers, and it's counterproductive. If I was a religious person and I was doubting the dogma, and I was looking for a tribe that would take the place of my church, who is my social support network, and I looked to the free thought community, and I found Matt's show, I wouldn't leave my church for that hostility. No way, I wouldn't do it. So that being said, in order to understand the rift, I guess you could call it, we need to understand something about our tribalistic psychology, because that rift is based on that psychology. For 99 and change % of our history as a species, we lived in small, close-knit tribes, topping off at about 150 people, all working together for survival. And back then, intertribal violence was very common. It was not uncommon for the rival tribe to conduct raids, slaughter all the men, slaughter all the children, and take the women as their spoils of war. That history did something to our psychology. It gave us a deep mistrust of people who aren't like us, people who are from a different race or a different religion or non-believers, somebody from a different political orientation or a different sexual orientation. How you put people in different colored t-shirts in the research lab, and guess what happens? They start hating each other. So it's important to understand that psychology, because when societies fall apart, when friendships fall apart, a lot of times it's on the lines of our political psychology that rests on that history, on that mistrust. And we need to understand that. Another pressure was being abandoned by our tribe. In our ancestral past, being abandoned by our tribe would have been a death sentence. So the thought experiment I ask my audiences and classes to entertain is like, what do you think would happen if we helicoptered you into the Serengeti and dropped you off by yourself? How long do you think you'd survive that? You wouldn't survive that. And so that fear of being abandoned by the tribe also had a big impact on our psychology. And in addition to that, it was not uncommon for our tribe to execute us for misbehavior. That was startlingly common. And not only for misbehavior, but just for not following the tribal norms appropriately. And sometimes that could get incredibly capricious. Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham reminds us at just how arbitrary that can get. So in the age of Hammurabi, you could be murdered by your tribe for selling beer, okay? In 1700s New England, you could be murdered by your tribe for masturbating. In the biblical age, for working on the Sabbath or saying the Lord's name in vain. So that danger has done some things to us. It made us exquisitely sensitive to what other people think about us. It makes us fearfully adhere to tribal norms to make sure that we are complying with what our culture expects of us. And that can be good, but it could also be very bad, because sometimes what we're adhering to is barbaric. Sometimes it's scientifically just wrong. And again, for a free society, we have to question norms, right? And that pressure also led us to do some pretty nasty things to one another. For example, accusing somebody else to deflect attention away from ourselves. That person right there, that person is a blasphemer. Focus on them. Or that person is a transphobe. Focus on them, right? And that's what happens. So Matt will tell you, and he actually said this verbatim on his show, that there's no such thing as cancel culture. And the irony of that, he said it unironically, in the same breath that he says, and I'm canceling you, Hector Garcia. I'm not kidding. You just can't make this shit up. But cancel culture is real. And it's ancient. It goes back to the days when we were hunter-gatherers. It's emotion-driven, it's volatile, and and the thing about it is it operates largely underneath our conscious awareness. So that is why I talk about this all the time. That's why I think it's so important to bring these instincts up to the surface, because we cannot have functioning societies or friendships or communities or nations without understanding that psychology. Not only that, but that psychology is increasingly being manipulated by outside forces. Corporate interests, foreign nations will manipulate us. They'll flood the internet with memes that pit us against one another. So we need to understand that psychology. So that being said, let me talk about what the dispute was all about. It was about posts that I made on social media. Now, I use my social media to exchange ideas in psychology. Sometimes they're controversial, about politics, about religion, about relationships, and the idea is to generate discussion. So a couple posts I made recently they were contentious, right? One of them was that the extreme left and the extreme right share a lot of common psychological traits in common. We've known this for decades, but more and more research is emerging that makes that connection for us, which I'll unpack in just a little bit. The next thing was that the extreme left's cancel culture, the extreme left's transphobia witch hunts, and the extreme left's attacks on free speech really gave the Trump campaign the ammunition that it needed to turn the election in 2024, which I think has been disastrous thus far. And we need to reflect on that. So cancel culture, you already know what I mean by that. It is definitely a thing. We need to understand it. Transphobia, witch hunts, what I mean by that is accusing somebody of being transphobic even when they're not, right? And for the record, let me just state, I've always been supportive of LGBT rights. I have family that are LGBT and I love them dearly. And let me tell you something. If I saw a trans person in the street getting beat up because they were trans, I would join that fight. And the person beating the trans person up, they would know they were in a fight. Okay? But you can't tell that to extremists. They can't hear it. They'll be like, oh, sure. Why then are you asking questions? Well, I think it's important that we have the freedom to ask questions. Matt will tell you no, these aren't just questions. These mean something deeper and more sinister. That's nonsense, In fact, so one of the questions I asked is whether or not, trans women should be competing with biological women in competitive sports. That's a legit question. There are other questions that are legitimate. Does transitioning result in better or worse mental health for trans people? That's a legit question. It's an important question. It's a helpful question that concerns public health. So, but I think the extreme left discourages those kinds of questions, and they will tell you literally, and somebody did tell me literally, that, you know what, because you pose that question, that means not only that you're a transphobe, but you want trans people to not exist, and you're contributing to trans people actually getting killed. That is the level of idiotic non sequiturs that you will hear around this conversation. And it's just wrong-headed. We should be able to ask those questions. They're pertinent. And the other issue was about censorship. There was the American Association of Anthropologists were having a conference. And there was a team of anthropologists who wanted to talk about the importance of studying the sex of the skeletal remains of our ancestors, because sex can tell us a lot about how people lived. But the AAA said, no, you can't ask that question. So they got banned from that panel. They canceled them, right? They couldn't ask those questions. And I think that's so wrong-headed of them. Another example of how we can cave to pressure is that the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most premier medical journals on the entire planet, recently issued a statement saying that sex assignments at birth have no clinical utility, right? Which is absolutely false, and that's a medically dangerous thing to say. for so many reasons. Like one among many is that there are lethal doses of benzodiazepines, like Xanax, for example, that would be fine for a biological male, but that would be a lethal dose for a biological female, irrespective of how they identify. That's dangerous, that's irresponsible, and so we need to stand up to that kind of pressure in those kinds of circumstances. So I want to tell you something about Matt, something else about Matt. I read a paper the other day that it was an empirical paper studying engagement on social media. And it was among a few that are out there now that really found that moral outrage, especially against the rival tribe, boosts engagement almost more strongly than anything else, right? Moral outrage, increase in likes, followership, viewing time, etc. And immediately I thought of Matt's show, The Hang Up. And I also thought of Jordan Peterson, because I think Matt and Jordan have a lot in common. And here's something about Matt that I want to say, and it's a compliment. Matt is a smart person. Matt's smart, and Matt has demonstrated that he can exchange ideas. He can exchange ideas, he can debate, and do it in a rational, constructive manner. In fact, he's done so with Jordan Peterson, right? And Jordan Peterson is also very smart. But both of them will take shortcuts, and they will stoke outrage among their base to build their followership. They will do that, and that causes societal division. I think it's playing a dangerous game. Now, I am 99% sure that Jordan Peterson knows that he's doing that. Does Matt know that he's doing that? I don't know. Something else that I want to explain to you that will help tie all these pieces together is a concept called right-wing authoritarianism. So in the aftermath of World War II, when the world was trying to understand what gave us the Nazi Party, what gave us Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust. So a team of social scientists were embarked on answering that question. And so they began studying authoritarianism and the psychology of followership. And one of the products of their inquiries was a psychological instrument called the right-wing authoritarianism scale, the RWA scale. That scale is one of the best measures of the underlying psychology of political conservatism. And increasingly, it maps onto the underlying psychology of the extreme left as well. So that measure has three factors. One is ceding up control to authority figures. And usually those authority figures are loud, brash, big males, right? Aggressive males. Donald Trump, right? He's big, he's loud, he's aggressive to people. So does Matt Dillahunty's show, The Hang Up, reflect that dynamic? I don't know. Go check it out and ask that for yourself. The second one is social conformity. Conforming to what the person next to you is doing, conforming to what the person next to you is thinking, and being very intolerant of any divergence of thought among your tribe. So we see this on the extreme right. Religion has been marked by this capacity or this tendency throughout the history of religion. Do we see it on the left? Yeah, we absolutely do. Is that evident in Matt's show, The Hang Up? Check it out. Ask yourself if he tolerates diversity of opinion. And the third factor is aggression towards outsiders. Take Donald Trump, right? He's aggressive to anybody he disagrees with. Immigrants, increasingly LGBT, his political opponents. He demeans them. He curses at them. He calls them names. Is Matt's show an example of that? You bet it is. You bet it is. He demeans people. He's aggressive to people who don't think like him. Very aggressive. So that being said, I just think it's important that we retain the ability to question our tribe and to go against our tribe, even when it's controversial, even when it's at some risk of judgment about, to ourselves. And a good example of that I can think of is the late Charles Krauthammer. Leading up to the 2016 election, Charles Krauthammer made the very public statement that he felt that Donald Trump was unfit to serve as the commander-in-chief of the most powerful nation that the world has ever seen because of his narcissistic personality disorder. So who was Charles Krauthammer? Well, for one, he was a conservative media pundit. He was a frequent panelist on Fox News, but he was also a psychiatrist. Not only was he a psychiatrist, but he was in one of the work groups that formulated the DSM, the diagnostic manual that we use to diagnose psychiatric conditions. So he went against his tribe and pointed out something that was pretty obvious, which I think, I hope more people on the extreme right can take an example from Charles Krauthammer and hold accountability to Donald Trump, right? And honestly, I think Krauthammer was right on the money. There's a quip in psychology, an old quip, and it's actually kind of harsh, but I think it's accurate. And it goes like this: narcissists see themselves as a piece of shit at the center of the universe. They see themselves at the center of the universe, or purport to see themselves that way. Donald Trump, I'm the best, I'm the biggest, I got the biggest words. You know what that sounds like, right? But at their core, the way they see themselves is just rotten. There's doubt, there's fear, and all of that grandiosity is just compensatory in nature. And I think that's right. How do we know that about Donald Trump? Oh my gosh, just look at what happens when actors, comedians spoof him. He becomes unglued. He becomes unglued. He has to lash out. The president of the United States goes onto X, goes onto social media, and insults these actors, says they should be canceled. They should have their contracts canceled. They're no talent, no good. You don't do that unless you're trying to protect something deep inside yourself, right? So anyway, Matt, I just want to tell you, I'm not going to divulge private conversations. It's just not my style. But I want you to do something. I have a homework assignment for you. And for anybody else who watches this show, or even if you haven't seen his show, go on his show and Matt, watch when your friends are on, okay? Watch them. Look at their body language, especially when you're bullying somebody. They are squirming in their seats. They are enduring what you're doing with so much discomfort. It's palpable. You can almost see the cogwheels in their brains turning and saying, you know what? Oh my gosh, please don't associate me with this kind of energy. That's not me. That's not what I'm about. I just have this book that I want to promote, and I think I can help people with it. Or I just have this podcast that I want to promote, or some kind of initiative that I think is useful. Or I just really feel that secularism is healthy, and so I want to promote that. By the way, that is an empirical question, Matt. And I think you know this. Phil Zuckerman's research has found that the most secular societies tend to be the healthiest. And that's one of the reasons that I've been on your show a couple times. It's just to contribute to that cause. And another thing I would like you to ask yourself, Matt, is doing what you do on your show, hanging up on people, cursing at them, insulting at them. Doing what you did in response to what I said for 30 minutes, does that come from a position of power, of certainty? Or is there something that you're protecting? I just hope you figure it out. You told us how big in response, you told us how big of a following you had on your other platform, something like 200,000 people. Good. And that it's educational. That's great. Use that platform. Maybe expand on that. But anyway, that's about all I want to say about this. Matt, you had mentioned that you would like to have either myself or Sam Harris on to debate you about these issues. I would, Matt, but I just don't know that you wouldn't hang up on me. But we can talk about it, okay? All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a good day. That's all for now.